Right, radio listeners, today we have a return guest in Dr. Jerome Corsi. Dr. Corsi is a New York Times best-selling author. He's a senior staff writer at WorldNetDaily.com, and he just continues to bring timely information to the country. And Dr. Corsi, we'd like to welcome you back to the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Paul, great pleasure to be back with you. Thank you.
Well, I was hoping today we might touch on two little subjects one at a time. I want to segue into your new book, The Great Oil Conspiracy. This book was brought to my table by listeners wanting to hear you talk about that, several weeks ago. And I thought we might segue into that by talking about one of your newest articles you wrote 5 days ago in the Middle East talking about Ahmadinejad. And I would tell radio listeners, we have the link if you want to go and get set up to get the feed and everything from WorldNet Daily on all the writings from Dr. Corsi. This is a very interesting breakdown on Ahmadinejad's speech in front of the UN. I was wondering if you could tell folks a little bit about that.
Yes, I was there reporting. I was at the UN listening to Ahmadinejad reporting on his speech for WND, and also Benjamin Netanyahu followed. And it was an amazing speech because Ahmadinejad began by proclaiming a new world order. Of course, this has nothing to do with the economic or globalist political integration that people like George H.W. Bush meant when they said new world order. This has to do with the radical Shiite idea that Shiite Muslims believe the Mahdi is returning. The Mahdi is a Messiah-like figure that went supposedly as a little boy down a well into hiding in 700 and something A.D. And it's the 12th Imam is what they call it as well. So they're 12ers, and they're like birthers, 12ers, truthers. Well, these are 12ers. That's how they're called internationally, believing that the Mahdi, the child Imam who went into seclusion at the bottom of a well more than 1,000 years ago, is going to come out of that well, but only when there's a world apocalypse to cause the Mahdi to come out. And when the Mahdi comes out, the belief is, by Ahmadinejad, the Iranians, the Shiite radicals who believe this, is that Shiite Islam will then triumph over all other religions in the apocalypse. Judaism will be gone, Christianity will be gone, even Sunni Islam, like the Saudi Arabians believe in, it will be another infidel religion that the Mahdi will come and destroy. And then this generation, this new world order of peace and tranquility, the Imam al-Mahdi, a man who's supposedly going to accompany, will be coming with Jesus Christ as his assistant to help him. So Jesus Christ's second coming will be also part of the Mahdi's second coming. And Ahmadinejad just very quietly pronounced to the UN that he had done everything necessary and that this era was already a fait accompli and had happened. And Mahdi was alive, and he had brought the Mahdi to be, and we were about to see this new world order dawn. Now, the vast majority of even the journalists in the UN didn't get it. Didn't have a clue what Ahmadinejad was talking about. But I've, written 3 books on Iran, going back to the Atomic Iran, which I wrote in 2005, and most recent is Why Israel Can't Wait, a short book I wrote in 2009. And the Mahdi is central to who Ahmadinejad is and what the radical religious leaders in charge of Iran truly believe.
Well, that's a key point right there. And had been communicating with Jed Babin back 3 or 4 years ago, saying, he was telling me, some of this stuff may sound crazy to you, the thing, boy in a well and all this stuff, but you need to take and look at these statements that are made by these officials and say, do they believe it? Do they firmly believe this is true? And if so, you must look at it from that position. And if he does believe this, the stuff you cover in this article that you wrote just 5 days ago, then he is foreseeing a bloodbath, a global bloodbath taking place that's going to wipe out just basically everybody but the Sunni.
That's right. And Ahmadinejad used this metaphor. The last page of his speech was all about the Al-Mahdi being here. And he said he used this metaphor of the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost like he's saying, come June, we're ready. We're going to have the nuclear war. Nobody can stop us. And the Mahdi will come. And the Mahdi, he said, will bless humanity with a spring that puts an end to our winter of ignorance, poverty, and war, with the tidings of a season of blooming. I mean, he was very lyric in his poetic speech, but it was all praising this new world order of peace. He says, we can sense the sweet smell of the soulful breeze of the spring, a spring that has just begun and doesn't belong to a specific race, ethnicity, nation, or region, a spring that will soon reach all territories in Asia, Europe, Africa, and the U.S. Well, this is a spring that occurs after the apocalypse. The Mahdi has come in the company of Jesus Christ, and all religions and all believers except Shiite Islam and the Twelvers are going to be destroyed.
Yeah. And, what should be happening is everybody that's reporting on that's looking at that, their jaws ought to be wide open in just awe of what this guy is saying, because not only should there be coverage and people really covering hard this quest by Iran to get the bomb and what they plan to do with it, but here's a guy, from what your article's really illuminating to me, here's a guy that says, not only am I going to get the bomb, we're going to get the bomb, but the bomb may play a part in a scenario that is just we're bringing to fruition. These events and things that are going to happen are happening, that will happen, and it's part of our glory to be a small part of that. I mean, that's just a dangerous scenario.
In fact, I was astounded, Paul, because Ahmadinejad gave this speech in such calmness. I mean, there was no bombastic rhetoric. He wasn't railing against Israel. He dealt with Israel and the United States as if we were both already gone.
Yeah.
And the journalists there didn't get it. The people at the UN said, what was this speech all about? All the journalists sitting around me said, nobody got it. And I said, you guys don't understand. He just told you that Iran was going to have a nuclear war and everything was going to be wiped out.
Yeah.
And effectively, last two paragraphs of what I wrote is that Ahmadinejad, this was like a victory lap around the UN. It was his eighth and final appearance. He cannot run for president in Iran a third time. And he was kind of saying, look, my mission's accomplished. I've set in motion the events that are going to bring about the return of this Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, and we've built the nuclear weapons. We've defied the UN. We've resisted your economic and diplomatic sanctions. And now we're about to see Israel wiped off the map of the Middle East and the United States destroyed.
Well, 2/3 of that is truth. In my opinion, they have defied the UN. They have gone forward against what have been sanctions and things that have not stopped them, and they are on the verge of, at least making their attempt to destroy Israel if Israel allows them to get that far. And it really takes us into segueing where America's position should be. When we look at our things such as energy independence, it's an amazing situation that we would be beholding, not just to Iran, but to other nations in the Middle East that don't like us, that have bombastic ideas that can turn on a whim and affect the cost of our energy. And that we're in that position. And your newest book, it's entitled The Great Oil Conspiracy, How the U.S. Government Hid the Nazi Discovery of Abiotic Oil from the American People. We have it linked up at IbbetsonUSA.com so people can find it and purchase it. It's a very interesting question that you've been addressing, I think, really going back to Black Gold Stranglehold, one of your books in 2005, which was another book that was brought to me by loyal followers of your writings. And tell us what's in this new book and really how it ties into our future dependence or non-dependence.
Well, the Great Oil Conspiracy is about the Nazis really understood that oil was abiotic. Abiotic means not created by any biological material. In other words, the Nazis knew that oil was not fossil fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually had developed the equations. Their initial quest was to be able to synthesize coal produce synthetic oil out of coal, because Germany did not have a lot of crude oil going into World War II. And, coming out of the Weimar Republic, the Nazis emerging felt like they needed to have synthetic oil if they were going to be able to fight a world war.
Right.
So the chemists became very important, and two of the chemists, a guy named Fischer and a guy named Tropsch, came up with these equations. And the equations are remarkable because they are the core understanding of how the Earth naturally produces oil in the mantle of the Earth on an ongoing basis, even today. And the Earth doesn't use any dead biological material to produce these hydrocarbons. Now, at the end of World War II, and during World War II, about 80% of the Nazi oil was being produced by these Fischer-Tropsch plants. And you can see in the book, I went back to the National Archives and got the original World War II materials, so you could see how effective the synthetic oil process was. I've got the pictures of the Nazi scientists and their fingerprints and mugshots. We had an Operation Paperclip, which, the OSS, the early version of the CIA, and U.S. military intelligence, we brought these Nazis to the United States.
Right.
But thousands of Nazi scientists here. And some of these guys, the intelligence files, which you can see in the book, say, this guy's still a Nazi. He hasn't changed. But we brought him anyway because these people, we wanted their knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And we did build a few coal conversion plants producing oil in the United States. But, of course, when you've had abundant crude oil, it's too expensive to produce synthetic oil from coal. And the Nazis said, the American government either doesn't get it or they don't want the American people to get it, because the core of our science is not about producing oil from coal. So these formulas, if you understand them, indicate there's deep earth oil readily available. They show you how to make all kinds of synthetic oil. They show you how oil is not fossil fuel, so it's not going to be limited. It's not going to be run out of. Actually, a renewable energy. And the only ones to benefit from the Nazi science at the end of World War II was, ironically, Russia, Soviet Union. Because our genius petrogeologist went over to Russia at the end of World War II and said, "You don't have any oil, Mr. Stalin," just like Germany, because they weren't finding abundant pools of oil and sedimentary rock.
Mm-hmm.
And Stalin just said, "Thank you very much, I don't believe you," because Stalin knew if the Germans had figured out synthetic oil, that he could send his scientists into Germany. He stole all the German knowledge. And then I started to remember reading about 1950 in the 50s that as a kid I was reading in the science journals at the time, magazines like Science, etc. The Russians were finding oil thousands of meters below the surface of the Earth. And I was saying to myself at that time, asking my dad, I said, Dad, where were the dinosaurs 1,000 feet below the surface of the Earth? Or the ancient forests? What
right.
plankton? And it was a revolutionary idea because at that time, you remember Sinclair Oil had Dino the dinosaur.
Oh yeah.
So Russia, utilizing the Fischer-Tropsch equations today, holds the largest number of patents on the Fischer-Tropsch process, and Russia is the leading, or one of the top 2 or 3, oil and natural gas producers of the world, defying our petrogeologists and creating what is known worldwide as the Russian-Ukrainian theory of abiotic oil, which is, I think, increasingly the predominant scientific understanding of oil, except in the United States, where this information is still being withheld and suppressed from the American people.
It's amazing to see that. And it's ironic we have Sinclair Dino Dinosaur Station still operating over here in Kansas.
Right.
And but the idea America is getting strangleholded, from so many different directions. If you were to travel down here to our Patriot stations, you have to go through 100 miles of just tens of millions of dollars of windmill factories that are just popping up over here at the expense of the American people, done via Kathleen Sebelius on her way out to the Obama administration from governor. We are spending and really taking the brunt of energy costs because they will fight things like the Keystone Pipeline coming through Kansas, but they will force our energy providers to incrementally increase these different energies that are, compared to oil, gas, and coal, not efficient at all. I mean, not even close in their efficiency, and their costs and infrastructures are not even there at all. And so, we're getting the shaft in so many different directions. It's hard to believe that people would not be pushing this just for America's own security and safety, let alone economic stability.
Well, in the book I show in The Great Oil Conspiracy that the oil companies know that oil is not fossil fuel, and that I think they're ready to admit it to the United States public when we're finding oil offshore almost everywhere we look.
Mm-hmm.
Deep earth oil really validates the abiotic theory. And I cite the work of Julian Simon, who I think is one of the most brilliant energy economists ever to live. And Julian Simon said, people are always worried about running out of energy. We're worried about running out of coal in the Industrial Revolution in 1850 in Great Britain. And today, the United States is the Saudi Arabia of coal. But yet the Obama administration with the EPA is insanely going to have us shut down 200 power plants that burn coal, while the Obama administration hypocritically has within their energy plank of their platform, that they want to have clean coal. Well, the problem is that the environmental lobby is so ideologically opposed to hydrocarbons that they want to maintain the fossil fuel theory. They want everybody to think this has got to be toxic because it's dead junk making oil. If they thought that the Earth naturally made oil and natural gas, how is the Earth going to produce something that's inherently toxic? We can figure out ways to utilize it naturally. It's a natural Earth product.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, if you want robust energy at a cheap price, we've got it. We've got abundant coal. We've got abundant oil. One of the surprising things about the Great Oil Conspiracy, the book, I end it showing people how the United States is in the process of becoming energy independent. And has zero to do with solar or wind, which are only ever going to produce 1 or 2% of our energy.
Right.
It has to do with the fact that the technologies have advanced. We're able to produce through fractured drilling, shale,
Yep.
hydraulic drilling, horizontal drilling, all these techniques, and the independent oil producers, not even the majors, have taken resources like the Bakken Field, which is up in Montana, this huge shale field, and are producing, millions of barrels of oil and also huge quantities of natural gas. And the U.S. Geological Survey 10 years ago said that Bakken Field was worthless.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I was a kid, they burned off the natural gas in the oil fields. You could see all the oil rigs burning at night.
Right, right.
And the reason was because we didn't know how to use natural gas. Well, now today, natural gas is an increasingly robust percentage of the energy market. And, experts like T. Boone Pickens are now advocating, instead of wind turbines, which he lost a ton of money on in Pampa, Texas, I think T. Boone Pickens is on a reasonable theme, which is liquefied natural gas, which we could even run long-haul trucks on if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, these are hydrocarbon fuels which are readily available, and where we've been told since the 50s we're running out. This oil guy at Shell Oil, M. King Hubbard, took a napkin one day and drew a normal bell-shaped curve and said, that's oil. We got a lot of it, then we use it up, we're at peak, and then it's all gone.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to be at peak oil in the United States in the 1970s. Today we're hitting oil independence under principles that Julian Simon would have understood. And worldwide, the Energy Information Administration or agency says we've got 1.38 trillion barrels of oil in world reserves, more than ever in human history. And that's despite the fact that our consumption of oil has doubled since the 1970s. Now, that sure does not sound to me like we're running out.
Right, and it really blows out this theory that we should accept paying $4 and $5 a gallon at the pump.
Precisely.
I mean, that is amazing.
But, try to build a new refinery with all the regulatory restrictions, and you're into 10 years of litigation against the environmentalists.
Yeah. Which are ferocious. The EPA just, they're outlawing farm dust over here in Kansas, saying that's a pollutant. And so, it's insane. And they're trying to condition the American people with this ever-increasing gas price. Be conditioned to use less because we're going to make it so unaffordable. And people should be screaming like this shouldn't be at this price, even half this price. I would say it would be reasonable that it should be at least half of what we're paying now.
I agree. And you've got the Agency 21 agenda, the UN, and all these environmentalists are on board. They hate industrial activity. They want to move everybody out of the countryside into these little 2x4 apartments in the city.
Yeah.
Take their cars away from them and reduce industrial activity.
Mm-hmm.
The government can have more control. The left's agenda, the environmental agenda, is absolutely anti-people, anti-economic growth, and it hates hydrocarbon fuels. And the Obama administration is the cheerleader.
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking to Dr. Jerome Corsi about his new book, The Great Oil Conspiracy, How the U.S. Government Hid the Nazi Discovery of Abiotic Oil from the American People. Also highlighting that you need to get on the feed to get the articles that come out all the time from WorldNet Daily. Great stuff. And Dr. Jerome Corsi, as always, we appreciate it. It's an honor to have you on the program. Do you have any parting thoughts before we sign off with you today?
No, I just except Paul say thank you and that remind the viewers we do have the Great Oil Conspiracy in all forms of electronic book, all forms of e-book, as well as hardcover, and it's supplied at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, the WND Superstore. The book is now readily available and cheaper in its electronic form.
Yeah, I tell you what, you got to balance the book costs with your gas costs, and that's a good way to get both in this day and age. And Dr. Jerome Corsi, as always, we appreciate you coming on the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
All great honor and pleasure to be with you again. Thank you.
All righty, bye-bye now.